419 million years ago, the oceans belonged to creatures the modern world would struggle to imagine. Not the swift hunters of today, nor the sleek shadows that slip through our seas, but armored giants, plated in bone, moving through warm, ancient waters with a slow and terrible certainty. Their jaws did not need teeth. Their skulls themselves had become blades. Above them, the continents were still barren and red, silent beneath an unfamiliar sky. No forests whispered in the wind. No birds crossed the air. No footsteps had ever pressed into the earth. And yet, hidden within this quiet, alien world, something extraordinary was beginning. Beneath those vast tropical seas, life was experimenting. Fish were learning to bite, to dominate, to endure. Along muddy shorelines, fins were beginning to press against the soft sediment. On the empty continents, the first delicate green shoots were reaching upward into the light. The planet itself was changing its breath, slowly filling the atmosphere with oxygen that would one day sustain every creature to come. The Devonian was not simply an age of fishes. It was the long, patient turning point, when Earth began to become recognizable, when the foundations of forests, of land animals, and eventually of ourselves were quietly being laid. Tonight, we will drift back into that forgotten chapter of deep time. We will move slowly through warm, shallow seas, through the first silent forests, and across the muddy edges where life first began its cautious journey onto land. There is no need to hurry here. The world we are about to enter unfolded over 60 million years, in rhythms far slower than thought, far gentler than memory. So, settle in. Let the noise of the present begin to fade. As this ancient world rises softly around you, let its quiet oceans and distant forests carry your thoughts further and further away, until the great armored fish sink once more into darkness. The first trees stand motionless beneath the stars, and sleep comes as naturally as the turning of the earth itself. This is the story of the Devonian Period, the age when monsters ruled the seas, forests first covered the land, and the first distant steps toward our own existence had only just begun. 419 million years before the present, the oceans hold a world that seems almost too old to belong to Earth. The continents sit in unfamiliar places. The air is warm and heavy. The land is mostly bare, stretched in red and brown silence beneath a softer Sunday. No birds move through the sky. No grass covers the ground. No flowering plants brighten the shorelines. The planet is quieter than the modern world, but beneath the surface of its seas, life is gathering into forms of strange power. In the warm shallows, the water is clear in some places and clouded in others by fine sediment drifting from distant rivers. Sunlight falls through the upper layers and breaks across reefs built by organisms that no longer exist. Sponges with stony skeletons rise in rounded masses. Ancient corals branch and spread like pale underwater thickets. Between them, small creatures filter, crawl, hide, and feed. The reef is not silent. It is filled with the slow movement of water through channels and hollows, with the faint scrape of shells against stone, with the passing shadows of fish that have begun to fill the sea in astonishing variety. This is the Devonian Period, a long chapter of the Paleozoic era, lasting from about 419 million years Truk to about 359 million years Truk. It will later be remembered as the Age of Fishes, and the name is deserved. Fish are everywhere in this world. Some are small and quick, moving in silver flashes through the sunlit water. Some keep close to the bottom, armored and cautious, feeling their way over the mud. Some carry sharp fin spines. Some still belong to older jawless lineages, drifting at the edge of a changing world. Others have jaws, and that single invention changes the rhythm of the sea. A jaw gives a vertebrate a new relationship with the world around it. It can grip, it can crush, it can tear. It can take food that earlier creatures could only brush against or filter from the water. In the Devonian seas, this simple anatomical change becomes a quiet revolution. The ocean is no longer only a place of drifting and grazing. It becomes a place of pursuit, defense, pressure, and adaptation. Bodies grow thicker. Armor grows heavier. Fins change shape. Eyes watch from different angles. Every form of life seems to answer another form, and the sea becomes a slow, ancient conversation between hunter and hunted. Among the most memorable animals in these waters are the placoderms, the armored fish. Their heads and front bodies are covered with plates of dermal bone, dense and strong, like living shields carried through the water. Some are small, no longer than a hand. Some are broad, flat, and bottom-dwelling. Others grow into large predators, moving with the strange weight of creatures built more like fortresses than swimmers. Their armor limits speed, but it gives them protection in a sea where biting has become possible. It turns their bodies into a compromise between defense and movement, between safety and hunger. One of these armored predators becomes the symbol of the Devonian Ocean. Dunkleosteus moves through the late Devonian seas with a skull built from thick bone and jaws that do not carry true teeth. Instead, its own jaw plates form cutting edges, sharpened by repeated contact as the mouth opens and closes. The animal does not need the clean tooth rows of later sharks. Its skull has become the weapon. When it feeds, the motion is sudden, but the image around it remains strangely calm. A dark shape approaching through greenish water, a head like a carved block of bone, a mouth opening in a fraction of a moment, water rushing inward with the prey. The force of such a bite is not only a spectacle. It reveals how far vertebrate evolution has already traveled. Earlier seas had contained many animals, but the Devonian is one of the first times when jawed vertebrates truly occupy the upper levels of marine food webs across the planet. This is a turning point that still echoes in the modern ocean. Every tuna cutting through open water, every reef fish grazing in sunlight, every shark patrolling a continental shelf belongs to a world shaped by innovations that gained strength in the Devonian. The details have changed, but the basic story of vertebrate bodies competing, feeding, fleeing, and adapting has deep roots here. Still, the Devonian is not only the story of monsters. That would make the world too small. Beyond the armored fish, other lineages are quietly preparing futures of their own. Early sharks, not yet the rulers they will later become, swim in the shadow of placoderms. Ray-finned fish remain modest, but their descendants will one day become the most diverse group of vertebrates in the modern world. Lobe-finned fish carry something even more unexpected within their bodies. Strong internal bones inside fleshy fins, bones arranged in ways that begin to resemble the architecture of limbs. In these fins, the future of land vertebrates is present, but hidden. The sea floor, the reefs, the shorelines, and the muddy shallows are all part of the same unfolding experiment. The Devonian is a time when life seems to test new possibilities with patience rather than haste. A fish develops stronger jaws. Another strengthens its fins. Plants on land begin to stand higher than before. Roots enter the soil and change the chemistry of rivers. Oxygen slowly rises. Carbon dioxide slowly falls. The atmosphere and the biosphere begin to influence each other with increasing force. Nothing happens quickly by human standards. Yet, across millions of years, the planet is being rearranged by living things. The land above the Devonian Sea remains unfamiliar, but it is no longer entirely empty. Low plants cluster near water. Later, taller growth will rise, and the first forests will alter the face of continents. Those green changes will feed rivers with minerals and organic matter. The rivers will feed the seas. The seas will bloom, suffocate, recover, and suffer again. The same transformations that make the world richer will also help make it unstable. In this ancient period, life does not simply adapt to Earth. It begins to reshape Earth, and Earth answers in climate, chemistry, and extinction. The opening of the Devonian story therefore belongs not to a single creature, but to a whole planet entering a new state. The oceans are filled with armored forms and early experiments in speed. The shallow waters hold reefs as complex as cities. The continents wait beneath a warming sky, slowly preparing to turn green. At the edges between water and land, where mudflats glisten and quiet channels breathe beneath low plants, some fish begin to use their fins in ways that are not quite swimming. The movement is small. The consequence is immense. In the stillness of deep time, the Devonian world continues its slow work. It builds jaws, forests, reefs, limbs, soils, and new kinds of air. It gathers the ingredients of the modern living world without knowing any future. The sea remains warm. The armored fish pass like shadows over stone. The first green growth holds the wet ground, and beneath the calm surface of an ancient planet, the foundations of nearly every familiar breath, forest, fin, and footstep are beginning to form. The Devonian earth rests beneath a sky that would look familiar in color, but not in meaning. The air carries oxygen, yet not in the same balance known to the modern world. Carbon dioxide is far higher than it is today, holding warmth close to the planet like an invisible blanket. The sun is slightly dimmer than the modern sun, but the thick atmosphere keeps the surface mild and humid. Across much of the globe, there is little permanent ice. Sea levels are high. Warm water spreads over the edges of continents, turning wide continental shelves into shallow inland seas. The continents themselves are strangers. Their outlines do not resemble the maps of the present. The future pieces of South America, Africa, Antarctica, India, and Australia are joined together in the enormous southern landmass called Gondwana. Far to the north and across the tropics, Laurentia and Baltica have already joined to form Laurussia. Smaller fragments drift between them like broken tiles on a blue floor. Siberia lies apart. Other pieces of future Asia move through warm latitudes. The planet is not still. Its surface is always moving, but here the motion is slow enough to seem like sleep. Between Gondwana and Laurussia, the Rheic Ocean narrows through the long pressure of plate movement. Ocean crust sinks into the mantle. Volcanic arcs rise. Mountains build along continental edges. These processes are not background scenery. They guide the climate, the seas, and the lives of animals that never see a mountain. When rock is lifted into the air and rain begins to wear it down, minerals flow into rivers. Rivers carry those minerals to shallow seas. The chemistry of the water changes. Reef builders receive the materials they need. Algae bloom. Oxygen shifts. The invisible work of stone becomes food, shelter, and sometimes danger. Much of the Devonian world is ocean. Around 85% of the surface is covered by water, and many of the greatest habitats are not deep ocean basins, but shallow seas lying across continental margins. These seas are warm, sunlit, and rich with dissolved minerals. In places that will one day become North America and Europe, water covers broad lowlands. The sea moves slowly over drowned landscapes, making lagoons, channels, reef platforms, and muddy basins. Light reaches the bottom across wide areas, giving life room to build upward from stone and sediment. This geography helps explain why the Devonian becomes so productive. A deep open ocean can be vast but poor in nutrients. A shallow continental sea is different. It receives sunlight from above and minerals from land. It has currents that stir the water without always sweeping life away. It has surfaces where organisms can attach, burrow, filter, graze, and hide. The Devonian world creates these conditions on a grand scale. It makes nurseries for fish and foundations for reefs. It creates edges, and edges are often where evolution becomes most inventive. The climate is generally warm, but it is not simple. Early in the Devonian, carbon dioxide may be many times higher than modern levels. Tropical seas reach temperatures that would feel almost bath-like. The poles are mild compared with later icehouse worlds. But through the middle and late Devonian, the atmosphere begins to change. Plants spread across land, and their roots enter rock and soil with quiet persistence. Roots and fungi break minerals apart. Rainwater carries dissolved elements away. Chemical weathering draws carbon dioxide out of the air and stores carbon in sediments and carbonate minerals. Slowly, the planet begins to cool. This is one of the deeper lessons of the Devonian. Small organisms can move the atmosphere. Plants no taller than shrubs, then trees rising into early forests, alter the balance of gases around an entire world. Their leaves take in carbon dioxide. Their tissues release oxygen. Their roots change the pace at which rock dissolves. Their dead bodies add carbon to soil. What seems like soft green growth is also a planetary engine. The same process continues in modern forests, wetlands, and soils, though the world around them has changed completely. As carbon dioxide falls, oxygen rises. The increase is gradual, uneven, and difficult to reconstruct with perfect certainty. But the direction is clear. More photosynthesis and more burial of organic matter allow oxygen to accumulate. For animals, oxygen is possibility. It allows stronger muscles, larger bodies, more active movement, and deeper habitats. In the sea, oxygenated water opens zones that were once difficult for complex life. On land, rising oxygen helps arthropods breathe more efficiently through their delicate systems of tubes and internal surfaces. The Devonian atmosphere is not merely air. It is a changing boundary that decides what bodies can become. Yet the same plant-driven transformation brings risk. As roots break rock and deepen soil, rivers carry increasing amounts of phosphorus and other nutrients into the sea. In warm coastal water, nutrients feed blooms of microscopic life. When these organisms die and sink, decay consumes oxygen. The result is a strange paradox. The atmosphere becomes richer in oxygen, while parts of the ocean lose it. Dark organic sediments form in basins where the seafloor cannot breathe. These black layers will later become some of the clearest signs of crisis. Before the crises arrive, the planet appears abundant. Warm seas spread across continents. Reefs grow. Fish diversify. Plants green the shorelines. The air slowly changes through the work of living tissues. Everything is connected, though no creature understands the connection. A root in Devonian soil helps alter the chemistry of a distant sea. A mountain rising along a continental edge sends minerals into reef water. A shift in ocean circulation changes which animals can survive in the depths. The Devonian is a lesson in patience and interdependence, written across stone, water, air, and bone. In the modern world, this ancient arrangement still matters. The shape of continents has changed, but the principles remain. Mountains still feed rivers. Rivers still feed seas. Forests still trade gases with the atmosphere. Nutrient overload can still create oxygen-poor dead zones in coastal waters. Climate still responds to carbon moving between rock, air, water, and life. The Devonian does not feel distant because it is simple. It feels distant because its changes unfold slowly, beneath the scale of ordinary human attention. Across this old planet, Gondwana continues its northward drift. Laurussia sits near the equator with warm, shallow coastlines. The Rake Ocean narrows. Volcanic belts breathe out gases. Rain falls on young mountains. Rivers carry red sediment to the sea. Under a humid sky, the world prepares the conditions for one of the largest reef-building intervals in Earth history, and for the rise of fish unlike anything the planet has seen before. The stage is not passive. The stage is the machine. Every coastline, every basin, every current, and every grain of weathered rock helps shape the living drama that follows. The Devonian Earth is not a misplaced version of the modern planet. It is a different world, arranged under different skies, held together by different coastlines, and shaped by oceans that cover far more of the surface than they do today. The familiar outlines of continents have not yet appeared. There is no Atlantic Ocean in its modern form. There is no India separated from Antarctica, no Australia isolated in the southern seas, no Mediterranean basin, no Himalayas, no Amazon basin, no northern ice cap shining beneath polar light. The planet carries the same deep engine inside it, but its face is almost unrecognizable. Gondwana stretches across the southern hemisphere as a vast supercontinent. Within its body lie the future fragments of Africa, South America, Antarctica, India, and Australia, not yet broken apart and scattered across the globe. Its northern margins reach toward warm latitudes, while its southern portions extend toward the pole. Farther north, Laurussia sits near the equator, formed from the joining of Laurentia and Baltica. This landmass contains the ancient cores of what will much later become North America and parts of northern Europe. Siberia drifts alone. Smaller continental fragments move through tropical waters, carrying the beginnings of lands that will one day become parts of Asia. The space between these continents is wide, but not empty. Oceans fill the gaps. The Rheic Ocean lies between Gondwana and Laurussia, slowly narrowing as plates converge. Elsewhere, great open waters stretch far beyond any coastline. From orbit, the Devonian Earth would appear more blue than green or brown, with most dry land clustered unevenly across one side of the globe. The arrangement creates a world where vast ocean basins influence climate, while shallow seas along continental margins become some of the richest living spaces on Earth. These shallow seas are among the defining landscapes of the Devonian. They flood low continental interiors and spread across broad shelves, sometimes covering regions that are now deep within modern continents. Much of what will become central North America lies beneath warm tropical water. Large parts of Europe, Siberia, northern Gondwana, and scattered continental fragments are also submerged along their edges. These seas are not deep, dark, and empty. They are sunlit. They are mineral-rich. In many places, the bottom lies close enough to the surface for light to reach it clearly, allowing reef builders and algae to thrive. The water has a different feeling from the cold open ocean of later worlds. It is warm, often tropical, and in places almost still. Fine sediment drifts through lagoons. Carbonate mud settles in quiet basins. Reef walls rise where currents bring clear water and steady nutrients. Channels cut between reef masses. Behind them, protected shallows hold small fish, invertebrates, and mats of microbial life. Along shorelines, tides move over flats of mud and sand. In these margins, water and land are not sharply divided. They pass into one another through estuaries, swamps, tidal channels, and low, wet plains. The climate above this water is mostly warm. The early Devonian atmosphere contains far more carbon dioxide than the modern atmosphere, and this greenhouse gas helps trap heat close to the surface. The sun is slightly less luminous than it is today, but the planet remains warm because the air holds warmth efficiently. Permanent polar ice is limited or absent for much of the earlier part of the period. Sea levels remain high, in part because little water is locked away as ice. The thermal difference between equator and pole is gentler than it will be in later icehouse intervals, allowing mild conditions to reach high latitudes. The warmth does not make the world peaceful in a simple way. It makes it active. Warm water holds less dissolved oxygen than cold water, and this matters deeply for animals living in the sea. In some basins, especially where circulation is weak, the lower water can become oxygen poor. At the same time, warm, shallow seas can be extremely productive when sunlight and nutrients are available. The Devonian Ocean, therefore, carries both richness and risk. It can build reefs of astonishing size, then leave nearby deeper waters strained and dark. It can support large fish, then suffocate bottom communities when oxygen falls. The atmosphere also feels different because the land has not yet become fully green. At the beginning of the Devonian, much of the continental surface remains exposed rock, sediment, and thin biological crust. Without broad forests, there is less shade, less deep soil, and less organic material holding moisture in the ground. Rivers behave differently. Many channels are wide, shifting, and braided, spreading across unstable floodplains because deep roots have not yet pinned their banks in place. The land surface is raw, mineral, and easily eroded. Rainfall carries sediment quickly into nearby basins, tinting rivers and coastal waters with iron-rich red and brown particles. This rawness gives the Devonian world a quiet strangeness. A shoreline may hold low vegetation, but beyond it, the landscape opens into empty ground. Wind moves across stone and damp flats without passing through grass. There are no flowers. There are no broadleaf forests in the modern sense. The soundscape is thinner, lacking birds, mammals, frogs, and the endless insect chorus of later nights. Most animal life remains in water or close to wet ground. The land is beginning to awaken, but it has not yet become the crowded, layered world known today. The difference between land and sea creates powerful evolutionary pressure. The sea is crowded, competitive, and increasingly complex. The land is mostly open, but harsh. It offers light, space, and new resources. Yet it also brings gravity, dryness, and unstable temperatures. The shallow margins between them become the most important boundary on the planet. In warm pools, oxygen can fall. In muddy channels, fins can touch bottom. Around plant stems and roots, small animals can hide, feed, and decompose. These edges are not empty transitions. They are workshops where future forms begin to take shape. Modern Earth still carries traces of this Devonian arrangement, not in the positions of continents, but in the processes that began to matter then. Shallow seas remain engines of biological productivity. Continental shelves still host some of the richest marine ecosystems. Rivers still deliver nutrients that can nourish or damage coastal waters. Atmospheric carbon dioxide still governs planetary warmth. The connection between life, climate, and ocean chemistry, so visible in the Devonian, continues in altered form today. The Devonian Earth is alien because its map is wrong, its air is different, its seas are higher, and its land is only beginning to turn green. Yet it is also familiar in a deeper way. It is a planet of feedbacks, where rock affects water, water affects life, life affects air, and air changes the fate of every living body. Under the warm sky, continents drift slowly. Shallow seas breathe over drowned land. Carbon dioxide holds heat above the surface. In that strange and patient world, the conditions are forming for reefs to rise, fish to diversify, forests to appear, and life to begin its long movement toward the land. Across the Devonian world, life enters a period of quiet invention. The changes do not arrive as a single event. They appear in many places at once, in bodies that do not seem connected at first. A fish develops a stronger jaw. Another carries thicker armor. A plant grows a sturdier stem. A root reaches deeper into soil. A small arthropod moves through damp plant litter and breathes air with delicate internal surfaces. Each change is local, small, and ordinary in the life of the organism that carries it. Together, they form one of the great experiments in the history of Earth. The Devonian is often called the Age of Fishes, but that name holds only part of the story. It is also an age of new structures. Jaws become more powerful, fins become more varied, skeletons become more specialized. Vascular tissue allows plants to rise above the ground. Roots begin to anchor soil and break rock. Early land animals learn to avoid drying out, support their bodies against gravity, and use the thin resources of terrestrial habitats. The period becomes a laboratory of living form, though nothing within it is planned. Evolution works through survival, inheritance, pressure, and time. In the oceans, the invention of jaws changes the behavior of vertebrates more deeply than size alone could show. A jaw is not just a weapon. It is a tool that allows precision. It lets an animal choose larger prey, crush hard shells, scrape surfaces, bite into flesh, and defend itself with new force. Earlier, jawless fish live within narrower possibilities. They filter, rasp, and suck. Jawed fish enter a wider world of interaction. Their bodies begin to answer the demands of pursuit and resistance. Muscles strengthen, sensory systems sharpen. Armor appears not only as protection, but as evidence that attack has become a central part of life. This pressure gives rise to placoderms, acanthodians, early sharks, and bony fish in many forms. Some Devonian fish are heavily armored and slow. Others are lighter, quicker, and more flexible. Some remain close to the seafloor, where the mud hides invertebrates and decaying matter. Others move through open water, where speed and vision matter more. The sea becomes layered with roles. There are ambush predators, filter feeders, bottom dwellers, scavengers, and small hunters. This ecological layering is one of the most important features of the Devonian. It means the ocean is no longer filled merely with animals, but with relationships. A unique insight hidden inside this diversity is that dominance does not always belong to the forms that will last. The armored placoderms rule many Devonian waters, yet they leave no living descendants. Ray-finned fish remain less imposing, but their lineage will eventually fill rivers, lakes, reefs, and open oceans across the modern planet. Early sharks are not yet the great symbols of marine power, but they will inherit spaces left open after extinction. The Devonian shows that evolution does not reward the most spectacular body forever. It often preserves the flexible, the adaptable, and the lineages able to pass through crisis. Among bony fish, the split between ray-finned and lobe-finned forms becomes especially important. Ray-finned fish carry fins supported by slender bony rays, efficient for life in water. Lobe-finned fish carry fleshy fins with a stronger internal skeleton. Inside those fins are bones arranged in ways that begin to echo the structure of limbs. These animals are still fish. They swim, breathe through gills, and belong to water. Yet their bodies contain possibilities that will matter far beyond the Devonian. The future arm, wing, flipper, and hand begin not as tools for land, but as structures useful in shallow aquatic environments. This is one of the quiet wonders of the period. Many features that later seem designed for one purpose begin under different conditions. Limbs do not first appear because animals decide to walk across dry land. The elements of limbs arise within fins used for pushing, bracing, steering, and lifting in shallow water. Lungs and lung-like organs are useful where warm, stagnant water carries too little oxygen. Eyes placed high on a flattened head help an animal living near the surface or bottom. The body that will later move onto land is assembled piece by piece in water before land becomes its main stage. On the continents, plants begin their own transformation. Earlier land plants are low and simple, dependent on moist places. During the Devonian, vascular tissue changes their limits. Xylem carries water upward. Phloem moves sugars through the plant body. Stems become taller. Branching becomes more complex. Roots become stronger and more active. The land begins to develop height, texture, and shade. A bare mineral surface becomes a living surface. Even before true forests dominate, the presence of plants alters the way water moves across ground and the way sediment gathers in low places. The partnership between plants and fungi is one of the most important hidden forces in this transformation. Fungi live among early roots and root-like tissues, helping plants extract minerals from poor soils. In return, plants provide sugars made through photosynthesis. This exchange is ancient, and it remains fundamental in modern ecosystems. Many forests still depend on underground fungal networks that help trees gather nutrients and communicate stress. In the Devonian, this relationship is already shaping the land. The greening of Earth is not the work of plants alone. It is a collaboration between kingdoms of life. Small animals follow the plants. Arthropods move through damp ground, around stems, and through decaying organic matter. Early mites, springtails, millipede-like animals, scorpions, and spider-like forms occupy the first simple food webs on land. Their world is close to the soil. It is a world of films of moisture, fungal threads, spores, fragments of plant tissue, and tiny prey. They do not make the land loud or visibly crowded, but they make it active. They begin the cycles of feeding, decay, and nutrient return that still govern forest floors today. The Devonian experiment therefore unfolds in several connected realms. The sea tests jaws, armor, speed, and new fin structures. The shore tests breathing, bracing, and survival in low-oxygen water. The land tests roots, stems, soils, and the first terrestrial food webs. The atmosphere responds to photosynthesis. Rivers respond to roots. Oceans respond to nutrients carried from land. No single change remains isolated. Every innovation touches another part of the planet. In the modern world, the results are everywhere. The bones of land vertebrate limbs carry the memory of lobe-finned fish. Forest soils carry the legacy of Devonian roots and fungi. Coastal dead zones reveal the same nutrient and oxygen dynamics that became dangerous in ancient seas. The abundance of modern fish reflects opportunities opened after Devonian experiments and extinctions. The period is not only a time of strange animals, it is a time when Earth begins assembling systems that still define life. Under the warm Devonian sky, none of this has a destination. Fish feed and flee. Plants grow toward light. Fungi enter roots. Small arthropods move through damp litter. Rivers carry minerals to shallow seas. The planet changes because living things pursue ordinary survival. In that slow pursuit, Earth becomes more complex, more connected, and more capable of supporting the worlds that will follow. In the warm, shallow seas of the Devonian, life begins to build upward. The seafloor is no longer only a surface of mud, sand, and scattered shells. In the clearest tropical waters, where sunlight reaches down through moving blue-green layers, living organisms raise walls of stone. They do this without intention and without haste. Layer by layer, generation after generation, their bodies trap minerals from seawater and leave behind hard skeletons that become foundations for more life. Over thousands of years, the foundations grow into reefs. These Devonian reefs are not built by the same organisms that shape most modern tropical reefs. The great reef builders of this period are largely stromatoporoids, a group of hypercalcified sponges, along with tabulate and rugose corals. They are animals of a vanished architecture. Stromatoporoids form domes, sheets, and crusts of calcium carbonate. Some grow like rounded boulders fixed to the seafloor. Others spread in layered mats, binding loose material together. Their skeletons look dense and laminated, with fine internal structures that record slow growth through time. They do not wave bright tentacles like modern reef corals. They sit in the current, filter water. Around them, tabulate corals form honeycomb colonies, branching thickets, and broad sheets. Rugose corals, often called horn corals, grow as solitary cones or colonial masses. Calcifying algae and cyanobacteria coat surfaces and help cement the reef framework. Bryozoans, brachiopods, crinoids, trilobites, mollusks, and many smaller animals occupy the spaces between larger builders. The result is not a simple pile of skeletons. It is a living structure with cavities, ledges, tunnels, slopes, crests, and sheltered basins. Water moves through it. Sediment settles in it. Predators hunt through it. Larvae attach wherever a surface opens. At their height, Devonian reef systems become some of the largest biological constructions the planet has ever known. In places that will much later become Western Australia, Alberta, and southern China, reef complexes stretch for hundreds of kilometers along ancient coastlines. Some grow tens of meters thick. They form barriers against waves, protected lagoons behind them, and deeper fore-reef slopes beyond them. From above, they would appear as pale, submerged ridges following the margins of continents, like long living seams between land and open sea. A modern observer might be tempted to call them cities, and the comparison is useful if it remains gentle. Like cities, reefs concentrate life. They create shelter where the surrounding seafloor might be exposed. They gather food by slowing currents and trapping particles. They provide surfaces for attachment, holes for hiding, and hunting grounds for predators. A small fish can disappear into branching coral. A brachiopod can anchor on a firm ledge above the mud. A crinoid can raise its feathery arms into moving water. The reef multiplies the number of possible ways to live. This is the hidden power of structure in evolution. A flat seafloor offers fewer niches than a reef with height and complexity. When organisms build three-dimensional habitats, they create opportunities not only for themselves but for others. The Devonian reef builders become ecosystem engineers long before the term exists. Their bodies change the shape of the seafloor. That altered shape changes currents, light, sediment, and predator-prey relationships. Many later ecosystems work the same way. Modern coral reefs, kelp forests, mangrove roots, seagrass beds, and even human-made structures all show how physical complexity can invite biological diversity. The Devonian reefs thrive because the world around them favors construction. Warm, shallow seas are widespread. Continental shelves are broad. Carbonate minerals are available in seawater. The climate is warm enough to support tropical reef belts across wide areas. In many places, clear water allows photosynthetic organisms to contribute to reef stability and productivity. The continents are positioned so that shallow marine habitats spread across the tropics. The geology of the planet, the chemistry of the ocean, and the biology of reef builders come together in a rare balance. Within the reef, movement is constant but unhurried. Small fish pass between shadows. Armored forms patrol the edges. Early sharks and bony fish move through open channels. Trilobites creep along lower surfaces. Crinoids sway above the bottom, their stalks fixed while their feeding arms gather particles from the water. Brachiopods open and close their shells slowly, filtering food. Sponges draw water through their bodies. Every surface is contested. Space is valuable. A patch of hard substrate can become the difference between life and burial. Competition in these reefs is not always violent. Much of it is silent. One colony grows over another. A sponge encrusts a dead coral surface. A branching coral shades a slower organism beneath it. Sediment smothers low growth in quiet pockets. Storms break pieces from the crest and send rubble into deeper water. New organisms settle on the broken fragments. Death becomes foundation. The reef is both fragile and persistent, constantly damaged and constantly rebuilt. These ancient reefs also affect the broader planet. Their carbonate skeletons lock carbon into rock. Over long intervals, reef building participates in the carbon cycle, drawing elements from seawater and storing them in limestone. The remains of Devonian reef systems later become important geological formations. In some regions, their porous structures will influence groundwater movement and even form reservoir rocks for petroleum deposits. The quiet labor of extinct sponges and corals becomes part of the deep architecture beneath modern landscapes. Yet the same features that make reefs rich also make them vulnerable. They depend on stable conditions: clear water, suitable temperature, enough oxygen, enough carbonate chemistry, and manageable sediment. If the water becomes too muddy, light declines. If nutrients rise too much, algae and microbes can alter oxygen levels. If seas become anoxic, bottom communities suffer. If temperature or sea level changes too quickly, the balance can break. Reefs are strong because they are interconnected, but this also means stress can pass through them like a slow shadow. For much of the Devonian, the reefs continue to grow. They stand as living monuments of an ocean at its most inventive. They shelter the fish that give the period its name. They bind coastlines into bright marine corridors. They show that life is capable not only of inhabiting environments, but of constructing them. In their walls, the Devonian Sea becomes layered, textured, and full of hidden rooms. The modern world no longer contains stromatoporoid reefs of this kind. The builders are gone, and the great systems they created vanished with them. Still, their lesson remains visible wherever living organisms shape the spaces around them. A reef is not merely a place where life gathers. It is life becoming landscape. In the Devonian shallows, under warm light and high seas, that transformation reaches a scale Earth has never seen before. Stone grows from bodies. Bodies make shelter. Shelter invites more bodies. The sea becomes architecture, and the architecture breathes. In the Devonian seas, the rise of the placoderms gives the age of fishes its most distinctive shape. These animals do not glide through the water with the clean lines of modern tuna or the flexible grace of reef fish. Many carry the weight of armor. Their heads and forward bodies are covered in plates of bone, fitted together like a natural shield. Behind this armored front, the body may narrow into a softer tail, giving the animal a strange division between fortress and swimmer. They look like creatures built at the boundary between defense and hunger. Placoderms are among the earliest jawed vertebrates to become truly dominant. Their success is not based on one body form. It is based on variety. Some live near the bottom, pressing close to the sediment and feeding among small invertebrates. Some cruise through open water, some browse, some scavenge, some filter feed, and some become large predators. The name often brings to mind armored monsters, but most placoderms are not giants. Many are modest animals, adapted to particular habitats with quiet precision. Their importance lies in how widely they spread and how many ecological roles they occupy. The armor is the first thing that defines them. It forms from dermal bone, a tissue related to the deep bony layers that still contribute to the skulls and scales of later vertebrates. In placoderms, this bone expands across the head and chest into heavy plates. The plates protect the brain, gills, shoulders, and vital organs. In a Devonian ocean where biting predators are becoming common, such protection matters. A thick shield can turn a fatal attack into a scrape. It can allow a slower animal to survive in waters where speed alone is not enough. Yet armor always carries a cost. Bone is heavy. Rigid plates reduce flexibility. A fish wrapped in a shield cannot twist as freely as a more lightly built swimmer. The placoderm body therefore becomes a study in compromise. Some forms accept slower movement in exchange for protection. Others refine their shape to reduce drag. Some use ambush rather than pursuit. Some stay near the bottom, where sudden bursts matter more than long-distance speed. The Devonian Sea does not reward a single solution. It rewards many partial solutions, each suited to a different pocket of water, reef, river, or lagoon. Their jaws are just as important as their armor. Placoderms do not have teeth in the modern sense. Instead, the edges of their jawbones form cutting or crushing surfaces. In many species, these bony plates meet and wear against each other, keeping the edges sharp. This is a different path from the tooth rows of sharks or the varied teeth of later bony fish, but it works. It allows placoderms to bite, shear, grind, and process food with new efficiency. Their jaws turn the head itself into a feeding instrument. Among the most successful placoderms are the arthrodires, a group whose name refers to their jointed neck. This joint between the skull and thoracic armor gives them an advantage that a fully rigid armored body would not have. When the mouth opens, the head can lift while the lower jaw drops, widening the gape and strengthening the feeding motion. This arrangement allows even a heavily armored fish to strike with surprising speed. It is a reminder that placoderms are not crude early experiments. They are highly specialized animals, shaped by millions of years of refinement. Arthrodires become extremely diverse. Some are small bottom feeders, moving over sediment with careful motions. Some become mid-sized predators along reefs and coastal channels. Some reach great size and occupy the upper levels of the food web. Their success shows that armor does not prevent ecological expansion when anatomy finds ways to work around its limits. The jointed skull, the bony jaw blades, the heavy shield, and the softer swimming tail combine into a body plan, flexible enough to spread across much of the Devonian world. Another group, the antiarchs, follows a very different path. These placoderms are often smaller and more strongly associated with bottom habitats. Many have broad armored heads and trunks, with paired bony appendages extending from the sides like jointed supports. Bothriollepis is one of the most widespread examples. It appears in marine, brackish, and freshwater settings, and its fossils are found across many ancient continents. This wide distribution suggests a remarkable ability to tolerate different environments. In a world of shifting shorelines, changing salinity, and unstable waterways, flexibility can be as powerful as strength. The success of Bothriollepis reveals a quieter kind of dominance. It is not the dominance of a giant predator. It is the dominance of persistence, spread, and adaptability. Some researchers have suggested that certain antiarchs may have had lung-like organs or could survive in oxygen-poor water by using air in some limited way, though details remain debated. What is clear is that these animals thrive in the kinds of marginal environments that define much of the Devonian: deltas, coastal flats, lagoons, and freshwater basins. They are not glamorous, but they are deeply successful. Placoderms also show early complexity in reproduction and development. Fossils from the Gogo Formation of Western Australia preserve extraordinary three-dimensional details, including evidence that some placoderms gave birth to live young. One fossil, Materpiscis, preserves an embryo inside the body of the mother, connected by a structure interpreted as similar in function to an umbilical cord. This discovery is remarkable because it shows that internal fertilization and live birth evolved among jawed vertebrates far earlier than once assumed. The Devonian Ocean is not only experimenting with jaws and armor, it is also testing reproductive strategies that will appear again and again in later vertebrate history. This is one of the most valuable insights placoderms offer. They are extinct, but they are not evolutionary failures. They pioneer major features of vertebrate life: jaws used in active feeding, complex skull mechanics, paired reproductive behavior, large body size, and diverse ecological roles. Their lineage ends, yet many of the possibilities they explored remain central to later animals. Extinction does not erase influence, it only removes the bodies that first carried it. In the modern world, no placoderm swims in any sea. Their armor has vanished from living oceans. But the Devonian problems they faced remain familiar. Animals still balance protection against mobility. Turtles, armadillos, sturgeons, crocodilians, and many reef fish carry versions of that old compromise. Predators still refine jaws for force, speed, suction, or precision. Species still thrive by becoming flexible rather than spectacular. The placoderms belong to a lost branch of the vertebrate tree, but the pressures that shape them continue to shape life. For tens of millions of years, placoderms are among the great rulers of the Devonian waters. They move through reefs, rivers, lagoons, and open seas. Some scrape along the bottom, some filter gently through the water, some wait in shadow and strike. Some wear armor so thick that only the strongest jaws can threaten them. In their rise, the ocean becomes more complex, more competitive, and more recognizably vertebrate. The Devonian Sea has many inhabitants, but the armored fish give it its ancient face: bone-plated, jawed, patient, and powerful beneath the warm light of a vanished world. In the late Devonian seas, among the many armored fish that move through reefs, basins, and dim coastal waters, one form carries the placoderm body plan to its most memorable extreme. Dunkleosteus does not need the length of a whale or the speed of a modern shark to command attention. Its power is concentrated in the head. The skull is broad, heavy, and plated in thick bone. The front of the body is armored like a living shield. Behind it, the softer body narrows into a swimming form that is still partly uncertain, because the armor fossilizes far more readily than the rest of the animal. What remains in stone is the face of a predator built around the act of biting. Dunkleosteus lives in a world where the upper levels of the marine food web are already crowded with experiments. Sharks are present, but not yet dominant. Bony fish are diversifying, but many remain secondary players. Placoderms still hold much of the power. In oxygen-poor basins and along continental shelves, large armored predators move through water that can be murky, warm, and green with suspended life. The sea is not a clear blue emptiness. It is layered with sediment, plankton, reef shadows, and the remains of countless organisms. A large animal passing through it appears first as a darker pressure in the water, then as the blunt outline of armor and bone. The most famous species, Dunkleosteus torelli, is known especially from the Cleveland Shale of what is now Ohio, a late Devonian deposit formed in a shallow sea with low oxygen near the bottom. Such environments are harsh for animals living on the seafloor, but they can preserve the dead with unusual care. Bodies that sink into oxygen-poor mud are less disturbed by scavengers and burrowing organisms. Over time, the mud becomes shale, and the armored skulls remain as dark records of a sea that no longer exists. This is one reason Dunkleosteus feels so vivid today. Its soft body is mostly gone, but its head survives with a force that imagination can complete only carefully. Older reconstructions often made Dunkleosteus enormous, stretching it to lengths that rivaled the largest living predatory fish. More recent studies suggest a smaller but still imposing animal, perhaps around 4 to 5 meters long for the largest individuals, though estimates continue to be refined because complete body fossils are lacking. This revision does not diminish the animal. It makes it more interesting. Dunkleosteus is not remarkable simply because of size. Its importance lies in the mechanics of its skull. It shows how evolution can produce extreme feeding power without true teeth, without a modern shark body, and without the long, flexible jaws of later marine predators. The jaws of Dunkleosteus are made from bony plates. These plates form sharp, cutting edges where teeth might be expected. As the animal opens and closes its mouth, the edges wear against each other, helping maintain their slicing surfaces. The result is not a mouthful of replaceable teeth, but a skull transformed into a blade system. This is a different evolutionary solution to the same problem that many predators face. Food must be seized, cut, crushed, or swallowed. Sharks solve the problem with rows of teeth. Mammalian carnivores solve it with differentiated tooth shapes. Dunkleosteus solves it by turning jawbones themselves into the cutting tools. Its bite is also fast. The skull operates through a linkage system in which the lower jaw drops while the head lifts, expanding the mouth quickly. In a fraction of a second, the gape opens and water rushes inward. This creates suction, pulling prey toward the jaws before the crushing and slicing force closes around it. The combination of suction and power is important. Dunkleosteus is not only a biting machine, it is a suction feeder with a cutting skull, using water movement and bone strength together. Many modern fish still use suction feeding, though in different anatomical forms. The Devonian predator is therefore strange in appearance, but not alien in principle. It belongs to a long vertebrate tradition of using physics as much as force. The bite force estimates for Dunkleosteus place it among the most powerful known biters of the ancient seas, especially at the rear cutting plates. Yet the more subtle insight is that force is concentrated. A sharp edge focuses pressure into a smaller area. A predator does not always need to be the largest animal in the water if its feeding apparatus can direct stress efficiently. This is a lesson repeated throughout natural history. The form of a weapon matters as much as the strength behind it. In Dunkleosteus, bone, leverage, speed, and suction meet in a single feeding motion. Evidence suggests that Dunkleosteus feeds on other armored fish and large prey. Fossil plates bearing scrape marks and damage are consistent with bites from powerful bony jaws. Some remains suggest that hard pieces may have been swallowed and later regurgitated, much as some modern predators expel indigestible material. The image is not one of endless violence, but of an animal processing a difficult diet in a difficult world. Armored prey is not easy food. It demands a predator capable of breaking through defenses that evolved for the same dangerous sea. There may also be evidence of conflict between individuals of the same kind. Bite marks on placoderm armor, including possible damage from other large arthrodires, suggest that the greatest threat to an apex predator can come from its own lineage. This pattern is not rare in nature. Crocodilians, sharks, big cats, and many territorial animals may injure or kill members of their own species. In the Devonian Sea, where large predators share space along productive margins, competition does not need to be constant to leave marks in bone. Dunkleosteus becomes an icon because it seems to embody the Devonian Ocean, armored, experimental, powerful, and temporary. It is part of a lineage that dominates for tens of millions of years, yet leaves no descendants in the modern sea. This gives the animal a quiet significance beyond its bite. It reminds the modern world that dominance and permanence are not the same thing. A form of life can rule its environment, refine its body to extraordinary efficiency, and still disappear when the planet changes. The modern ocean is shaped by survivors of later crises. Sharks, ray-finned fish, marine reptiles, whales, and seals all belong to chapters that unfold after the placoderms are gone. Dunkleosteus belongs to an earlier experiment in predatory design, one that ends before the Carboniferous begins. In the greenish Devonian water, it moves through the shadows of reef and shale basin, carrying the full weight of a vanished solution. Its jaws open. Water folds inward. Bone meets bone. Then the sea settles again, warm, dim, and ancient, as if nothing unusual has happened. Beyond the heavy silhouettes of placoderms, the Devonian Ocean contains a wider and quieter diversity. The armored fish dominate many scenes, but they do not own the entire sea. Around them move other vertebrate lineages, some ancient and fading, some modest and newly rising, some carrying futures that will become far greater than their Devonian forms suggest. The water is crowded with experiments. Each fish body is a different answer to the same ancient pressures of food, movement, oxygen, defense, and reproduction. In the open water above reefs and muddy shelves, early sharks begin to establish themselves. They are cartilaginous fish, with skeletons made mostly of cartilage rather than bone. This gives them lighter bodies, but it also makes their fossil record thinner and more fragmentary. Cartilage decays and disappears more easily than bone. Teeth, fin spines, and scales survive more often than full skeletons. Because of this, the early history of sharks is partly a history reconstructed from scattered pieces. Yet those pieces reveal a lineage already finding its place in Devonian seas. These sharks are not yet the large, specialized predators that later ages will know. Many are small and streamlined, built for agility rather than overwhelming force. Cladocellaceae, one of the best-known early sharks from the Cleveland Shale, has a slender body, broad fins, and a shape suited for quick movement through open water. Its teeth are small and multi-cusped, better for gripping slippery prey than slicing large animals apart. It is not a ruler of the sea in the way Dunkleosteus is. It is something more subtle, a fast, efficient hunter occupying spaces that armor cannot easily reach. This difference matters. The Devonian Ocean does not have one path to success. Heavy armor works in some environments. Speed works in others. A large skull with cutting plates can dominate certain food webs, while a lighter body and quick turns can capture small fish and soft-bodied prey in open water. Sharks survive through a strategy that becomes more important later. They are flexible, mobile, and not tied to the same heavy skeletal investment as placoderms. In the Devonian, they live in the shadow of armored giants. After later extinctions, that shadow will lift. Acanthodians also move through Devonian waters. They are sometimes called spiny sharks, though they are not true sharks in the modern sense. Their bodies are generally small and narrow, with fin spines projecting from several positions along the body. These spines may help stabilize movement, discourage predators, or support fins in ways that are still studied. Acanthodians occupy lower and middle levels of the food web, feeding on small organisms and serving as prey for larger hunters. They represent another experiment in jawed vertebrate design, one that survives for a long time but eventually fades. The jawless fish, older than all these groups, are still present but declining. Their ancestors were once among the most important vertebrates in earlier Paleozoic seas. In the Devonian, they find themselves in a world increasingly shaped by jaws. Without jaws, feeding options remain more limited. Some jawless forms are armored, some are bottom dwellers, and some occupy specialized niches where their older body plans can still function. But the overall direction is clear. The rise of jawed fish changes the rules, and many jawless lineages cannot keep pace. Only distant relatives of lampreys and hagfish will continue into the modern world. The bony fish are perhaps the most important quiet presence in the Devonian Sea. They do not always dominate the most visible ecosystems, but their lineages hold the future of vertebrate life. Their skeletons are made of bone. Their bodies diversify into two great branches. One branch is the ray-finned fish, the actinopterygians. The other is the lobe-finned fish, the sarcopterygians. In the Devonian, both are still early in their history, but the difference between them will shape life for hundreds of millions of years. Ray-finned fish have fins supported by slender, bony rays. This design is efficient, versatile, and well-suited to life in water. It allows fine control, maneuverability, and later, an enormous variety of body forms. During the Devonian, ray-finned fish remain relatively modest compared with placoderms and many lobe-finned fish. They are not yet the dominant vertebrates of aquatic ecosystems, yet their future is immense. In the modern world, most living fish species are ray-finned fish. Trout, tuna, seahorses, eels, goldfish, perch, angelfish, and countless reef fishes all belong to this lineage. Their Devonian ancestors are small notes in a much longer song. Lobe-finned fish take another path. Their fins are fleshy and contain internal bones arranged in a strong central pattern. Some forms are coelacanth-like, others are lungfish. Others belong to the lineages closest to tetrapods. Many lobe-finned fish possess lungs or lung-like organs, along with gills, giving them an advantage in warm, stagnant, oxygen-poor water. In swampy channels, floodplains, and shallow basins, this ability can matter greatly. A fish that can take air when the water is poor in oxygen has access to places where other fish struggle. The unique insight in this Devonian diversity is that the future is not carried by the most obvious rulers. Placoderms command attention, but they vanish. Ray-finned fish remain secondary, yet become the most diverse vertebrates in water. Lobe-finned fish lose much of their aquatic diversity, yet one branch gives rise to every land vertebrate. Sharks begin as minor predators, then inherit open ecological space after extinction. The Devonian Ocean is filled with lineages whose importance cannot be judged only by their size at the time. This pattern is familiar across the history of life. Great dominance can be temporary, while quiet persistence can become transformative. Modern ecosystems are full of survivors whose ancestors passed through bottlenecks, crises, and long intervals of obscurity. Mammals were once small in a world of dinosaurs. Birds emerged from one branch of theropod dinosaurs after a catastrophe. Flowering plants began as part of a larger botanical world before spreading widely. The Devonian fish tell the same kind of story much earlier. The future often begins at the margins. In the water itself, these lineages do not appear as categories. They appear as motion. A small shark turns through a channel of green light. A ray-finned fish flickers near the reef edge. A lobe-finned fish rests low in a warm, muddy pool, its fleshy fins touching the bottom. A jawless survivor moves along the substrate with the slow persistence of an older age. Above them, armored predators pass less often but with greater presence. Each belongs to the Devonian Sea. Each uses the same water differently. The ocean of this period earns its name not because fish are new, but because fish have become so many things at once. They are predators, grazers, filter feeders, scavengers, bottom dwellers, open water hunters, air breathers, and armored survivors. They fill habitats with a variety no earlier period has seen. In their bodies, the Devonian gathers several possible futures, only some of which will continue. The sea holds them all for a time, warm and crowded, under a high greenhouse sky, while evolution moves without hurry through fin, spine, jaw, lung, and bone. Along the warm margins of the Devonian continents, the boundary between water and land is not a clean line. It is a wide, shifting world of mud flats, reed-like plants, shallow channels, quiet pools, tidal inlets, and low, swampy ground. Water spreads thinly over the sediment, then gathers again in deeper hollows. Leaves and stems from early plants fall into the shallows and darken the bottom with soft organic debris. In still places, the water becomes cloudy and low in oxygen. In other places, it warms beneath the sun until breathing through gills alone becomes difficult for many animals. This is the setting where some lobe-finned fish begin moving toward a new kind of body. They are not leaving the water in a sudden conquest. They are living inside difficult water. Their world is shallow, tangled, unstable, and often poor in dissolved oxygen. A fish that can rise toward the surface, gulp air, brace against the bottom, or push through vegetation gains a small advantage. Over long spans of time, those small advantages shape bones, lungs, skulls, and fins. Lobe-finned fish are different from ray-finned fish in a way that becomes deeply important. Their fins are not supported only by thin rays. They contain a fleshy base with strong internal bones. In some Devonian forms, the bones inside the pectoral fins resemble the basic arrangement later seen in land vertebrate forelimbs. There is a single upper bone comparable in position to the humerus, followed by paired lower bones comparable to the radius and ulna, with smaller elements farther outward. These are not arms yet, they are still fins. But they contain a structural language that later limbs will inherit. The unique insight is that the first steps toward limbs occur before true walking. The bones that later support animals on land first evolve in water, where they help fish maneuver through complex shallow habitats. A fleshy fin can press against mud, lift the front of the body slightly, pivot in tight spaces, and help an animal move through roots and plant stems. In open water, such a fin may not be as efficient as a light ray fin. In a swampy channel, it becomes useful. Evolution does not build for distant futures. It modifies bodies for immediate landscapes. The skulls of these fishes also begin to change. Some become flatter and broader, with eyes positioned more toward the top of the head. This arrangement suits animals living near the bottom or just beneath the surface, watching the world above rather than only the water ahead. In shallow pools, prey may move at the surface, air may be reached above. A flat head can rest low in the water, while the eyes and breathing openings remain near the boundary between water and air. The body begins to belong to an edge. Breathing is central to this transition. Warm water holds less oxygen than cold water, and shallow Devonian wetlands can become especially poor in oxygen when plants and algae decay. Many lobe-finned fish possess lungs or lung-like organs, and these structures may descend from air-breathing capacities that were already useful among earlier fish. In oxygen-starved water, the ability to supplement gill breathing with air is not a dramatic novelty. It is a practical survival tool. A fish that rises, opens its mouth, and draws air into an internal chamber can remain active, where others slow or die. Modern lungfish preserve a faint, living echo of this ancient advantage. They are not direct models of Devonian tetrapod ancestors in every detail, but they show how air breathing can matter in stagnant or seasonal waters. Some modern lungfish survive drought by entering mud and slowing their metabolism. Their existence helps reveal that the boundary between water breathing and air breathing is not as absolute as it seems. For many fishes, especially in warm and variable habitats, air is simply another resource. The Devonian shoreline is also full of obstacles. Early plants grow along wet margins, forming low thickets and root systems. Fallen stems collect in channels. Sediment gathers around plant bases. Muddy bottoms shift under the weight of animals moving through them. In such places, swimming alone may not always be enough. A fish may need to push, brace, wriggle, lift, or drag itself through tight spaces. A fin with internal bones and muscles can become a support not for walking across dry land, but for moving through a cluttered aquatic world. This changes the old image of the water-to-land transition. It is not simply a fish stranded in a drying pond and forced to crawl toward another pool. That idea is memorable, but the evidence points to richer, wetter environments. The earliest near-tetrapod forms are associated with river deltas, floodplains, estuaries, and swampy settings. Not empty deserts. The movement toward land begins in places full of water, not places without it. The challenge is not only escape from dryness, it is survival in shallow, warm, crowded, oxygen-poor margins where the usual fish body does not always work best. The fossil record preserves several forms that illuminate this gradual approach to land. A Eusthenopteron shows a lobe-finned fish with important internal fin bones, yet still fully aquatic. Panderichthys has a flatter head and body, bringing it closer to the shape of later tetrapod-like animals. Elpistosteg reveals small bones arranged in ways that resemble digit-like elements inside a fin. Tiktaalik, later in this transition, combines fish features with a mobile neck and wrist-like structures in the pectoral fins. These animals are not steps on a straight ladder. They are branches near a broad evolutionary pathway. The presence of limb-like bones inside fins changes the meaning of the human hand. The hand does not begin as a hand. It begins as an internal support within the fin of a fish living in ancient water. The humerus, radius, and ulna are not sudden inventions of land animals. Their deep pattern is older, aquatic, and shaped by the demands of shallow environments. Every modern arm, wing, hoof, flipper, and paw carries a distant memory of these Devonian experiments, though each has been transformed by later evolution. As these fish move through the margins, the land remains difficult. Gravity is heavier without water support. Skin can dry. Eggs and young are vulnerable away from moisture. The earliest approach to land is therefore cautious and partial. The animals involved remain tied to water. They breathe through gills as well as lungs. They feed in aquatic habitats. Their fins support and steer more than they walk. Yet their bodies begin to solve problems that land will later demand more fully. In the quiet Devonian shallows, the change is almost invisible from moment to moment. A fish rests in warm, murky water, its broad fins touching the bottom. It lifts its head toward the surface. It pushes across soft sediment, not gracefully, not quickly, but effectively. Around it, early plants hold the mud. Small arthropods move through damp litter near the shore. The air above is warm and still. No true land vertebrate world exists yet, but its foundation is being assembled in the muscles and bones of fish that remain. For now, creatures of the water. The passage from fin to foot does not happen as a sudden escape from the sea. It unfolds slowly in the warm margins of Devonian waterways, where fish-like bodies begin to carry features that belong to more than one world. These animals are still tied to water. Their skins need moisture. Their young likely depend on aquatic places. Their tails remain useful for swimming. Yet the bones within their fins, the shape of their skulls, and the way their bodies press against the bottom show that something important is changing. The story is not a straight ladder, with one animal neatly becoming the next. It is more like a branching river system spread across deep time. Some channels end, some continue. Some run beside each other for millions of years. Fossils preserve only a few bends in that river, but they are enough to show a broad movement from fully aquatic, lobe-finned fish toward the first tetrapods, the four-limbed vertebrates. The change is gradual, uneven, and practical. It begins with bodies that solve problems in shallow water before they ever become bodies suited for land. Eusthenopteron, from the late Devonian rocks of what is now Quebec, remains one of the important early forms in this story. At first glance, it is clearly a fish. It has a streamlined body, scales, fins. It swims through water, hunts as a predator, and belongs fully to an aquatic world. Yet inside its paired fins are bones that resemble the deep pattern of later limbs. There is an upper element, then paired lower elements, then smaller bones farther outward. These structures do not make Eusthenopteron a walking animal. They show that the architecture of a limb begins before walking begins. This is one of the most important insights of the transition. Evolution does not first create a perfect leg and then place it on land. Instead, pieces of the future leg appear in fins, where they serve aquatic purposes. A strong fin can help a fish turn, brace, push, rise, and control its body in complex water. In this sense, the origin of limbs begins not with dry ground, but with shallow, cluttered, oxygen-poor aquatic habitats. The landward journey starts underwater. Farther along this broad pathway are forms such as Panderichthys. Its body is flatter than that of more typical fish. Its skull is broad, and its eyes sit higher, looking upward from a low head. This body suits a life close to the bottom or surface in shallow water. It is not built for fast pursuit in the open ocean. It belongs to channels, floodplains, and quiet margins where a low profile and strong fins are useful. The animal appears almost crocodile-like in outline. Though it remains a fish, its form suggests a world where the bottom matters as much as open water. Elpistostage brings another piece of the story into focus. Fossils examined with modern scanning techniques reveal small bones within the pectoral fin that resemble digit-like elements. These are not true fingers in the fully terrestrial sense, but they show that the pattern leading toward digits is already present inside a fin. The discovery matters because digits are often imagined as an invention of land. In reality, the earliest anatomical groundwork for fingers appears while the animal still lives in water. The hand begins hidden beneath fin tissue. Tiktaalik gives the transition its most familiar image. Found in Devonian rocks of the Canadian Arctic, it combines fish features with traits that seem closer to tetrapods. It has scales and fins. It has gills. It remains an aquatic animal, yet its pectoral fins contain wrist-like joints that can help support the front of the body. Its head is flattened. Its neck is more mobile than that of most fish, because the skull is less tightly bound to the shoulder region. This allows the head to move with more independence. In shallow water, such mobility can help an animal lift, look, and feed without moving the entire body. Tiktaalik does not walk across land in the way later tetrapods do. It likely props itself up, pushes against the bottom, and moves through shallow environments with a combination of swimming and bracing. The image is quiet and physical. A broad body resting in warm water, front fins pressing into sediment, head lifting just enough to clear the surface or shift position among roots and mud. This is not conquest. It is adjustment. It is a body learning to manage weight in a place where water still carries much of it. The earliest known tetrapods, such as Acanthostega and Ichthyostega from late Devonian rocks of Greenland, show that limbs themselves first function in ways more aquatic than terrestrial. Acanthostega has limbs with digits, but its body is still strongly adapted for water. It has a tail fin, internal gills, and limbs that are not well suited for bearing weight on land. Its digits may help it paddle through vegetation or push among submerged plants. It is a tetrapod, but not a landwalker in the modern sense. Ichthyostega appears somewhat more capable of moving outside water. Yet it too is not a simple land animal. Its limbs and body suggest a creature that can haul itself forward, perhaps with strong front limbs, but not walk with the smooth gait of later amphibians or reptiles. Its hind limbs are unusual, and its body remains tied to aquatic life. Both Acanthostega and Ichthyostega carry more than 5 digits on their limbs. This is a surprising detail. The 5-fingered pattern familiar in many modern tetrapods is not the original condition. It becomes standardized later. That detail gives the human hand a deeper strangeness. The 5 digits of many living vertebrates are not the first design, but a later narrowing of earlier variety. Early tetrapods experiment with 6, 7, or 8 digits. Evolution tries multiple arrangements before one pattern becomes common. The modern hand, wing, paw, and hoof carry not a perfect beginning, but a filtered inheritance from a wider Devonian range of forms. The transition from water to land is therefore less like a heroic first step and more like a long negotiation with physics. Water supports weight. Air does not. Water keeps skin moist. Air dries it. Movement in water can rely on buoyancy and tail propulsion. Movement on land demands stronger limbs, joints, muscles, and spinal support. The first tetrapods are not masters of land. They are animals living near the edge, using limbs in water, breathing air when needed, and only gradually acquiring the traits that later make terrestrial life possible. In the modern world, every land vertebrate is a continuation of that edge. Amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, and human beings all descend from ancient animals that passed through this Devonian transition. The bones of the upper arm and forearm, the pattern of wrists and digits, the ability of lungs to draw air, and the deep connection between movement and gravity all trace back to bodies shaped in shallow water. The first steps toward land are not loud. They occur in mud, warmth, and stillness, where a fish-like animal presses its fins into the bottom and lifts itself slightly into a new relationship with Earth. Before the first true forests rise, the Devonian land is open and raw. Much of the continental surface lies exposed beneath warm air, colored by mineral grains, red sediments, damp mud, and pale stone. There is no grass to soften the ground. No flowers lean into the light. No broad canopy breaks the sunlight into green shade. Across many regions, the land has the stillness of a planet not yet fully inhabited. Wind moves over rock and shallow soil. Rain gathers in channels, then runs freely across unstable ground, carrying sediment toward lakes, rivers, and the sea. Yet the land is no longer empty. Low plants have already begun to spread through wet places. They cluster along streams, around pools, and across damp flats where water remains close to the surface. Their bodies are simple compared with modern plants, but they carry one of the great inventions of terrestrial life: vascular tissue. With xylem to carry water upward and phloem to move sugars through the body, plants are no longer forced to remain as thin, flat growths pressed against wet ground. They can stand. They can branch. They can lift their photosynthetic surfaces into the air. This change seems quiet, but it alters the rules of the land. A plant that can grow upward can compete for light. A plant that can move water through its tissues can live farther from the immediate edge of a pool. A plant that can anchor itself more firmly can hold sediment in place. Early vascular plants are often small, sometimes only centimeters high, sometimes taller. They do not resemble modern trees, but they begin the process that will one day produce forests. They make the land vertical. The first root-like systems are just as important as stems. Early plants begin with simple anchoring structures, then gradually develop more complex rooting systems. Roots enter sediment, open cracks, hold grains together, and bring water and minerals into living tissue. Around them, fungi form partnerships that make nutrient gathering more efficient. These plant-fungal relationships are ancient and intimate. They allow plants to colonize poor mineral soils, while fungi receive sugars made from sunlight. Beneath the visible surface, the first land ecosystems become networks before they become forests. One of the most revealing windows into this early world comes from the Reenie Chert of Scotland, a fossil deposit from the early Devonian. There, hot spring waters rich in silica preserve plants and small animals in extraordinary detail. Cells, spores, stomata, and fungal threads remain locked in stone. The preservation is so fine that the ancient land does not appear only as a collection of names, but as a living surface. Tiny plants stand in damp ground. Fungi pass through tissues. Small arthropods move among stems and decaying matter. It is a miniature world, but it is already an ecosystem. The unique insight from places like Reenie is that terrestrial life becomes complex while still physically small. The early Devonian land does not need towering trees to have ecological relationships. It already contains producers, decomposers, parasites, predators, and herbivores. Fungi infect plants. Arthropods feed on living and dead material. Microbes help recycle nutrients. The basic logic of a forest floor exists before the forest itself. Modern ecosystems often appear complex because of their size and richness, but their deepest pattern begins here, in low, wet patches of Devonian vegetation. As plants spread, they change the ground beneath them. Before extensive plant cover, there is no soil in the modern sense across much of the land. There are sediments, mineral grains, microbial films, and weathered rock, but not the deep, layered, organic-rich soil familiar from later landscapes. Plants begin to create that soil. Their roots break rock and hold sediment. Their dead tissues decay and add organic matter. Fungi and microbes process that material. Water moves differently through the ground. Nutrients cycle locally instead of washing away immediately. The land begins to remember life in its layers. This is one of the great planetary transformations of the Devonian. Soil is not just dirt. It is a living interface between rock, air, water, and organisms. It stores carbon. It holds moisture. It feeds plants. It shapes rivers. It gives animals a place to burrow, hide, and feed. The first true soils make the continents more stable and more habitable. Every modern field, forest floor, garden, and wetland carries the legacy of this early process. The quiet brown layer beneath modern feet begins as an evolutionary achievement. The color of the land changes as well. The earlier continents are often imagined as red, exposed, and mineral, because iron-rich sediments and bare rock dominate many landscapes. As plants expand, green enters the scene more fully. At first it is low and patchy, gathered around water. Then it spreads into broader mats and thickets. The change is not immediate, and many interiors remain harsh and open. But the direction is clear. The land is being covered by photosynthetic life. Sunlight that once struck bare rock is now caught by living tissue. This greening affects the atmosphere. Plants draw carbon dioxide from the air during photosynthesis. Some carbon returns quickly through decay, but some becomes buried in soils and sediments. Roots and fungi accelerate chemical weathering, which also consumes carbon dioxide over long timescales. Oxygen rises as photosynthesis expands, and organic carbon is buried. The atmosphere becomes part of the plant story. Leaves and stems are not only local features of a shoreline, they are agents in a planetary exchange. The rivers respond. Without deep roots, many early rivers shift broadly across floodplains, splitting into braided channels that wander over loose sediment. As plant roots strengthen banks and add organic material to floodplains, channels begin to stabilize. Later Devonian landscapes will see more meandering rivers, deeper soils, and more complex floodplain environments. Even before large forests died, plants are beginning to teach rivers how to hold their shape. The connection between vegetation and river form remains visible today in every wooded bank that resists erosion and every cleared slope that washes away in rain. The first green land also prepares habitats for animals. Small arthropods find food in decaying plant matter, fungal spores, and living tissues. Predators follow them. Decomposers create nutrient cycles. The spread of plants therefore creates not only scenery, but a new food system. The land becomes more than exposed ground beside the sea. It becomes a place where energy from sunlight can be captured, stored, eaten, recycled, and captured again. By the end of this early transformation, the Devonian continents are no longer merely mineral surfaces waiting beneath the sky. They are becoming biological landscapes. Low plants root in damp soil. Fungi weave through hidden spaces. Organic matter darkens the ground. Rivers carry the signature of life toward the sea. The silence of bare land gives way to a softer stillness, one shaped by growth, decay, and renewal. The first forests have not fully risen yet, but the world that can support them is already being made. By the Middle and Late Devonian, the low green skin of the continents begins to rise into height. For much of early terrestrial history, plants remain close to the ground, small enough that the landscape still feels open and exposed. They soften the margins of water, darken the soil with decay, and begin the long work of holding sediment in place. But slowly, through changes in stems, roots, and vascular tissues, plants begin to make a new kind of space. They do not only cover the land, they begin to stand above it. The first forests do not resemble the forests of the modern world. There are no oaks, pines, palms, or flowering trees. There is no bird song in the canopy, no mammals moving beneath leaves, no fruit falling into shadow. The earliest forests are strange, sparse, and quiet. Their trunks may be hollow or built from tissues unlike modern wood. Their crowns may carry clusters of branchlets rather than broad leaves. Their reproduction depends on spores, not seeds in the familiar sense. Yet they create something Earth has never had before: a three-dimensional habitat on land, with height, shade, roots, litter, and layers. One of the most important early forest sites lies at Gilboa, in what is now New York. Fossil stumps and root systems preserved there reveal a Middle Devonian forest built by tree-sized plants such as Eospermatopterus. These plants stand several meters tall, with trunks rising from bulbous bases and root systems spreading outward in shallow patterns. Their crowns are unlike modern tree crowns, formed from many slender branches that hang or spread from the top. They do not have true leaves in the way later trees do. They are not wooden giants in the modern sense, but they are tall enough to cast shade and gather the land into vertical structure. That change is profound. A canopy changes light. A trunk changes wind. A root system changes water. Fallen branches and shed plant material create litter on the ground, which feeds fungi, microbes, and small arthropods. The space beneath tall plants becomes cooler, damper, and more protected than open ground. Shade slows evaporation. Roots trap sediment. Decay adds organic matter. The forest becomes a climate of its own, a small, controlled world inside the larger climate of the Devonian. Later in the Devonian, Archaeopteryx transforms the land even more deeply. It is one of the first trees that would seem partly familiar to a modern observer. It has true wood produced by secondary growth. Its trunk can become thick and strong. Its branches carry fern-like fronds. It reproduces by spores rather than seeds, but in size and structure it begins to resemble the idea of a tree as modern eyes understand it. Some Archaeopteryx trees may reach heights of 20 to 30 meters, rising over the Devonian landscape like quiet towers of green. The roots of Archaeopteryx are especially important. Earlier plants often hold the surface with shallow systems, but Archaeopteryx develops deeper, stronger roots that penetrate the substrate. These roots break rock, enter cracks, move water, and help create deeper soils. They change floodplains and riverbanks. They stabilize channels that once shifted more freely. They trap sediment in place and encourage the formation of layered soils rich in organic matter. A tree becomes more than a vertical plant. It becomes a geological force. This is one of the most important insights of the Devonian forest revolution. Trees do not simply live on landscapes. They build landscapes. Their roots help decide how rivers move. Their fallen tissues help decide how carbon is stored. Their canopies help decide how moisture remains near the ground. Their growth changes the chemistry of the air. The first forests, therefore, alter Earth at the scale of continents. The rise of trees is not only a biological event. It is a climatic, geological, and atmospheric event. As forests spread, carbon dioxide continues to be drawn from the atmosphere. Leaves and stems take in carbon through photosynthesis. Wood stores carbon in long-lived tissues. Roots and fungi accelerate the weathering of silicate rocks, a process that consumes carbon dioxide over geological time. Some dead plant material becomes buried in wet soils and sediments rather than fully decaying. Oxygen accumulates as more organic carbon is locked away. The air begins to change because forests are learning how to hold sunlight and matter. This connection between forests and atmosphere remains central to the modern world. Every forest today is part of a carbon exchange that began in deep time. Trees breathe with the air in a slow chemical rhythm, taking in carbon dioxide, releasing oxygen, storing carbon in wood and soil, and returning some of it through decay and fire. The Devonian forests are early participants in this rhythm. They do not create the modern atmosphere alone, but they push the planet toward a new balance, one that will influence climate, ocean chemistry, and animal evolution. The effect on rivers is equally striking. Before extensive rooted vegetation, many rivers flow as wide braided systems, with unstable banks and shifting channels. Sediment moves easily. Floodplains are raw and frequently rearranged. As forests expand, roots reinforce banks and hold soil in place. Channels become narrower and deeper in some settings. Meandering rivers become more common. Mud-rich floodplains develop. The river begins to curve, settle, and remember its path. Modern rivers winding through wooded valleys still carry this Devonian inheritance. The forest floor also becomes a new world for animals. Small arthropods move through fallen plant matter. Fungi thread through decaying tissues. Early decomposers break down organic material and release nutrients back into the soil. Herbivory becomes more important as animals feed on living plant tissues, spores, and soft growth. Predators follow. The forest does not yet hum with the sounds of later insects and vertebrates, but its food web is deepening. Life on land is becoming layered, not only physically but ecologically. The first seed plants appear near the end of the Devonian, modest at first, living in the shadow of spore-producing forests. Seeds are a quiet revolution. A spore is small and vulnerable, with little stored food. A seed protects an embryo and gives it a supply of nutrients. It can wait through dryness and unfavorable conditions. The earliest seed plants do not dominate immediately, but they introduce a strategy that will later reshape terrestrial life. The future of many modern forests begins here, in small reproductive structures appearing among ancient fronds and roots. By the close of the Devonian, the continents no longer resemble the open mineral world of earlier times. Forests stand across many regions. Deepening roots enter soil. Rivers curve through greener floodplains. Organic matter gathers in layers. The atmosphere has shifted. The land has shade. The first forests are not merely scenery in the story of life. They are engines of planetary change, breathing slowly beneath the Devonian sky, turning bare continents into living ground. Long before large vertebrates move confidently across dry ground, the Devonian land already belongs to smaller pioneers. They are easy to miss beside the story of armored fish and early tetrapods, but they arrive earlier, spread quietly, and help build the first animal communities outside the water. These creatures are arthropods, animals with jointed legs, segmented bodies, and external skeletons. They move close to the soil, among damp stems, fungal threads, spores, and decaying plant matter. Their world is low, shaded only in patches, and filled with textures too small for the larger story to see at first. The first land arthropods do not enter a fully formed forest world. They arrive while plants are still simple and low, while soils are thin, and while water remains essential to most terrestrial habitats. Dampness is everything. A small animal on land faces problems that water once solved. Its body can dry out. Its weight must be supported without buoyancy. Its breathing surfaces must take oxygen from air, while losing as little water as possible. Its eggs and young must survive in places where moisture may vanish. The move onto land is therefore not only a movement through space, it is a negotiation with dryness, gravity, and air. Scorpions and other arachnid-like animals are among the early pioneers. Some early forms may still live partly in water or along wet margins, carrying features linked to aquatic ancestry. Over time, arachnids develop internal breathing structures, such as book lungs, where thin layers of tissue are protected inside the body. This arrangement increases surface area for gas exchange while reducing water loss. It is a quiet solution to a difficult problem. Air offers more oxygen than water, but exposed breathing surfaces can dry quickly. Bringing those surfaces inward allows the animal to breathe and endure. Myriapods, including early relatives of millipedes and centipedes, also become part of the terrestrial scene. Millipede-like animals feed on decaying plant material, helping break it into smaller fragments. Centipede-like predators move after smaller prey. Their bodies are long, segmented, and close to the ground. Their many legs move over uneven surfaces where mud, plant litter, and mineral grains create a rough miniature landscape. In the Devonian undergrowth, such animals are not large or loud, but they are important. They turn dead plant tissue into food webs. Early insects or insect-like hexapods are also present, though they are small and wingless. Flight has not yet changed the skies. These early forms live near the soil, feeding on fungi, spores, decaying matter, or soft plant tissues. Their breathing system uses tracheal tubes, tiny branching passages that carry air directly into the body. This system works well for small animals and helps explain why insects become so successful later. In the Devonian, the system is still part of a humble world, close to the ground. Long before wings, flowers, and buzzing summer air. The Rhynie chert again offers a rare glimpse into this small world. Its exceptional preservation captures early terrestrial arthropods in association with plants and fungi. Trigonotarbids, extinct spider-like arachnids, move through the ancient plant community. They are not true spiders, and they do not spin webs, but they occupy a similar predatory role, hunting small animals among stems and litter. Mites are present as well, some associated with feeding damage on plant tissues. Springtails feed on decaying matter and fungal material. These fossils show that the early land is already full of interactions. This is the unique insight of Devonian arthropods. They help create the first complete land food webs before vertebrates truly arrive. Plants capture sunlight. Fungi and microbes break down dead material. Small herbivores and detritivores feed on plant tissues, spores, and decay. Predators feed on them. Nutrients return to the soil. This cycle is the heartbeat of terrestrial ecosystems. It is still present in every forest floor, compost layer, garden bed, and damp patch of leaf litter. The first land animals do not need to be large to be foundational. They only need to make energy move through the land. The atmosphere helps them. As plants spread and oxygen rises, arthropods gain more room for activity. Air-breathing systems depend on oxygen concentration. Higher oxygen can support more active bodies and, later in the Carboniferous, much larger insects and myriapods. The Devonian does not yet have the giant dragonfly-like insects of later coal forests, but it lays the atmospheric and ecological groundwork. The small arthropods of this period live at the beginning of a long expansion that will eventually fill forests, soils, deserts, caves, and skies. Their external skeleton is both armor and limitation. A hard cuticle protects against injury and water loss, and it gives muscles a firm structure to pull against. But it must be shed for growth. It can also become heavy at larger sizes. On land, the balance between protection, flexibility, breathing, and water conservation shapes arthropod bodies in countless ways. These pressures continue into the modern world. Beetles, spiders, centipedes, scorpions, ants, and crabs all carry variations of the same ancient compromises. The land around them grows more complex as forests expand. More plants create more litter. More litter supports more decomposers. More decomposers enrich the soil. Better soil supports more plants. This loop deepens terrestrial life. Arthropods are essential within it because they fragment organic matter and move nutrients through the upper layers of the ground. Without them, the first forests would store dead material differently. With them, the forest floor becomes active, processed, and alive. The earliest terrestrial communities are therefore not empty waiting rooms for vertebrates. They are functioning ecosystems in their own right. The later arrival of tetrapods will add new layers, but it will not begin land life from nothing. Arthropods have already explored the small spaces between stems. They have already hunted, fed, reproduced, and left traces in the soil. They have already made land a place of animal activity. In the still Devonian afternoon, a low patch of vegetation stands near a wet channel. The ground is dark with early soil. Fungal threads pass through hidden spaces. A small arachnid moves slowly beneath a stem. A springtail vanishes into damp litter. A millipede-like body works through decaying plant fragments. Above them, the air is warm and quiet. The world is not yet filled with the sounds of later forests, but its basic rhythm has begun. Growth, death, feeding, decay, and renewal repeated softly across the first green land. As Devonian life spreads across land and sea, the planet becomes more productive than it has ever been. Forests expand over the continents. Roots enter soil and stone. Rivers carry the products of weathering into warm, shallow seas. Reefs still rise in many tropical waters. Fish diversify in forms both armored and delicate. Small arthropods move through damp vegetation. At first, the pattern seems like abundance. More plants, more oxygen, more habitats, more bodies. Yet within this abundance, the conditions for crisis begin to gather slowly. The danger begins on land, but it does not stay there. As trees and rooted plants spread, they change the surface of the continents. Their roots hold soil, but they also break rock apart. Fungi help dissolve minerals. Rainwater moves through root zones and carries dissolved elements into streams. Phosphorus, nitrogen compounds, iron, and other nutrients travel from land to river, from river to estuary, from estuary to sea. The flow is natural, and in moderate amounts it nourishes coastal ecosystems. In the Devonian, the scale grows large enough to alter ocean chemistry. Warm, shallow seas receive these nutrients like a slow feast. Microscopic algae and other photosynthetic organisms bloom where sunlight, warmth, and minerals meet. The surface water becomes productive, filled with small living cells that capture light and multiply. For a time, this can support food webs. Tiny organisms feed small animals. Small animals feed larger ones. Fish gather where life is abundant. The sea appears richer, greener, more alive. But when the blooms die, their bodies sink. Decay is the turning point. As dead organic matter falls into deeper water and onto the seafloor, microbes begin to break it down. This process consumes dissolved oxygen. If circulation is strong, new oxygenated water can replace what is lost. If the basin is restricted, warm, stratified, or overloaded with organic matter, oxygen can disappear faster than it is renewed. The bottom water becomes stressed. Then it becomes low in oxygen. In severe cases, it becomes anoxic, a place where most animals cannot live. The Devonian Ocean is especially vulnerable to this process because so many of its richest habitats lie in shallow continental seas and semi-restricted basins. Warm water already holds less oxygen than cold water. High productivity sends more organic matter downward. Changing sea levels and continental positions can reduce circulation in some regions. The result is a quiet suffocation. It does not arrive like a storm visible at the surface. It spreads below, in darker layers, where the seafloor loses its animals and the mud begins to preserve organic carbon. The rock record remembers these intervals as black shale. These dark, organic-rich layers form where oxygen is too low for normal seafloor life and too low for burrowing animals to churn the sediment. Without bioturbation, fine layers remain intact. Without enough oxygen, organic matter decays incompletely and becomes buried. The blackness is not merely a color, it is a chemical memory of water that cannot breathe. In Devonian strata, such layers appear again and again, marking repeated episodes when parts of the ocean shift into oxygen-poor states. This is the paradox of the Devonian. The rise of plants increases oxygen in the atmosphere over long timescales, yet plant-driven weathering helps create oxygen loss in the seas. The same green revolution that prepares the land for richer animal life also feeds coastal waters enough to destabilize them. Life becomes both creator and stressor. The biosphere grows more powerful, and because it grows more powerful, it begins to disturb the systems that support it. Modern coastal dead zones offer a smaller echo of this ancient process. When rivers carry excess nutrients from farms, cities, and disturbed landscapes into seas and lakes, algae can bloom. When the algae die and decay, oxygen falls. Fish leave if they can. Bottom dwellers die if they cannot. The scale is different, and the causes include modern human activity, but the mechanism is deeply old. Nutrient enrichment, bloom, decay, oxygen loss. The Devonian shows that eutrophication is not merely a modern problem. It is a planetary process that can become dangerous when conditions align. In the Devonian seas, anoxia does not affect all animals equally. Reef communities are highly vulnerable because they depend on clear, oxygenated, stable water. Many reef builders cannot move away when conditions worsen. Brachiopods, trilobites, corals, sponges, and bottom-dwelling organisms suffer when seafloor oxygen falls. Mobile fish may escape local dead zones, but widespread anoxia can shrink safe habitats and disrupt food webs. Animals that tolerate low oxygen, live in deeper or quieter settings, or reproduce quickly, may survive better. Crisis becomes a filter. The unique insight is that extinction often begins long before the final disappearance. Ecosystems can weaken gradually as stress accumulates. Reefs may stop growing well before they vanish. Species may persist in smaller numbers, narrower ranges, or less favorable habitats. Food webs may simplify. Survivors may change shape or behavior in response to lower oxygen. Some post-crisis fossils show adaptations that may reflect life in dimmer, poorer waters. The catastrophe is not only the moment of death. It is the long thinning of possibility before death becomes visible in the record. Climate adds further pressure. Through the Devonian, carbon dioxide declines as plants expand and weathering increases. The world begins to cool from its earlier greenhouse state. Cooling can alter sea level and ocean circulation. Volcanic activity may add pulses of carbon dioxide, sulfur gases, mercury, and other stressors. Tectonic movements reshape basins and currents. The ocean becomes a system pulled in several directions at once, warming in pulses, cooling over longer intervals, rising and falling in level, oxygenating in some places and suffocating in others. For living creatures, these global processes are experienced locally. A reef that has grown for thousands of years receives muddier water. A basin that once held enough oxygen becomes dark at the bottom. A fish nursery loses shelter as reef builders decline. A brachiopod bed disappears beneath black mud. A trilobite lineage retreats into fewer habitats. The change is not always sudden from one generation to the next, but over time the living world becomes less secure. The Devonian Ocean, once a place of expanding invention, begins to carry a hidden heaviness. Its surface may still glitter in warm sunlight. Fish still pass through channels. Forested rivers still bring minerals to the coast. But below the calm upper water, oxygen can fade. The mud turns dark. The seafloor quiets. The same connections that made the planet rich now bind land, river, atmosphere, and sea into a shared instability. Life has changed Earth, and Earth is beginning to answer. The final chapters of the Devonian unfold as a long disturbance rather than a single ending. The world has become rich, layered, and deeply connected. Reefs have risen across tropical seas. Armored fish have ruled many marine food webs. Lobe-finned fish have explored the shallow margins. Forests have spread over the land, drawing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, releasing oxygen, deepening soils, and changing rivers. The same connections that make this world productive also make it vulnerable. When stress moves through one part of the system, it can travel into another. Around 372 million years Truoc, near the boundary between the Frasnian and Famennian ages of the Late Devonian epoch, the first of the great Late Devonian crises unfolds. It is known as the Kellwasser event. It does not appear as one simple moment everywhere on Earth. In the rocks, it is often recorded as dark, organic-rich shale, formed during intervals when oxygen-poor water spreads across marine environments. In some places, the crisis arrives in pulses. In others, the timing and severity differ. But across the Devonian world, marine life changes profoundly. The victims are not chosen at random. Reef ecosystems suffer heavily. The stromatoporoids, tabulate corals, and rugose corals that have built the great Devonian reef systems decline sharply. Many disappear. The complex guilds of reef constructors, binders, bafflers, filter feeders, and sheltered animals begin to collapse. A reef is not just a collection of organisms. It is a structure built from relationships. When the builders die, the shelter goes with them. When the shelter goes, the animals that depended on its cavities, surfaces, and currents lose their world as well. This is one of the deeper lessons of the Kellwasser crisis. Extinction can remove architecture before it removes all life. The sea may still contain animals after the reefs decline, but it no longer contains the same kinds of habitats. A flat or muddy seafloor cannot replace a reef wall filled with chambers and shaded passages. Biodiversity falls not only because species vanish, but because the spaces that allowed them to live vanish too. The modern world shows the same principle. When coral reefs bleach and break apart, the loss is not only coral. It is nursery, fortress, hunting ground, and city all at once. Brachiopods, trilobites, ammonoids, conodonts, and many other marine groups are also affected. Some lineages disappear entirely. Others survive in reduced form. The warm, shallow seas, once the richest parts of the Devonian marine world, become especially dangerous. Their productivity, their dependence on stable oxygenated conditions, and their connection to nutrient-rich runoff all make them sensitive to disruption. The same seas that once allowed reefs and fish to flourish become places where anoxia can spread with great force. The causes of the Kellwasser event are complex. Nutrient loading from land is one important factor. Expanding forests and roots accelerate weathering, sending phosphorus and other nutrients into coastal waters. Blooms of microscopic life follow. Decay consumes oxygen. Black shale forms. But other stresses likely contribute. Volcanic activity may add gases and toxic metals. Climate shifts alter circulation. Sea levels rise and fall. Ocean basins become more stratified in some regions. The crisis is not a single hammer blow. It is a convergence, a slow tightening of many pressures. Life survives, but it is changed. The reefs do not return to their former scale. Some placoderms persist beyond the Kellwasser event, but their world is diminished. Sharks and bony fish continue. Lobe-finned lineages remain. Tetrapod relatives continue in scattered habitats. The Famennian age that follows is not empty, but it is quieter in ecological structure. Marine communities rebuild from survivors, and the rebuilding occurs on a planet that has already lost much of its earlier Devonian complexity. Then, roughly 359 million years Truk, at the boundary between the Devonian period and the Carboniferous period, another crisis arrives. This is the Hangenberg event. In some ways, it is even more important for vertebrates. It again involves widespread oxygen stress in marine settings, recorded by dark shales, but it also includes strong sea level changes and evidence linked to cooling and glaciation on parts of Gondwana. The late Devonian greenhouse world has been moving toward a cooler state, and at the end of the period that shift becomes part of a larger ecological break. The Hangenberg event strikes the vertebrate world with unusual severity. Placoderms, after tens of millions of years of success, disappear completely. No armored placoderm lineage crosses into the Carboniferous. The group that once dominated so many Devonian waters leaves no living descendants. Many lobe-finned fish lineages are reduced. Early tetrapod diversity becomes difficult to trace afterward because the fossil record enters a sparse interval, often called Romer's Gap. Sharks and ray-finned fish survive, but the survivors are often smaller. Large vertebrate bodies become rare for a long span of time. This size pattern is one of the most striking insights of the extinction. After the Hangenberg event, many surviving vertebrates are small. Large predators and large armored forms vanish. For millions of years, ecosystems seem reset toward smaller, more generalized animals. In times of crisis, small size can be an advantage. Smaller bodies need less food, mature faster, reproduce more easily, and may survive in fragmented habitats. The great and powerful forms of one world can become too costly for the next. On land, the crisis also changes plant communities. Archaeopteris, one of the great Devonian forest trees, disappears. The forests that later rise in the Carboniferous are not simply the same Devonian forests, continuing unchanged. They are built by different plant groups under different atmospheric and climatic conditions. Seed plants survive and later expand. Lycopsids will become major trees in Carboniferous coal swamps. The land remains green, but its architects change. What follows is not an end to life, but a bottleneck. Ray-finned fish, once modest, will eventually become the most diverse vertebrates in water. Sharks will expand into ecological space left by placoderms. Tetrapods will emerge from sparse records as more capable land animals. Seed plants will continue a long rise, The Devonian world breaks, but its survivors carry forward the materials of the modern biosphere. In this way, the end of the Devonian is both loss and inheritance. The reefs fall silent. The armored fish vanish. The first great forests change their form. Yet the bones inside lobe-finned fins, the oxygen shaped by plants, the soils built by roots, and the survivors of marine collapse all continue into later time. Every forest, every fish-filled river, every breathing land vertebrate belongs partly to what passes through this ancient narrowing. The Devonian does not simply end, it becomes the hidden foundation beneath the